For this video, I'm going to demonstrate some adaptations and modifications for general warm-up activities for students with disabilities, with either general weakness or who fatigue quickly, or those who may be in wheelchairs who can still participate in these activities with slight modifications. So for the first exercise and warm-up activity, we are going to do push-up modifications. So if a student is having trouble with performing standard push-ups with proper form or being able to do a certain amount at one time without tiring out or fatiguing too quickly, here is one option that they can attempt to see if that makes doing the push-up a little bit easier. So we have right here just some hand platforms, and then I also have a pillow or anything else that would be softer to go underneath their knees and act as a knee pad. But what we're going to do here, we're going to get on our knees, place the platforms about shoulder width apart, a little bit wider. And then we're going to keep our back straight and feet up. And then simply just perform the push-up from that position. Now, another modification is if you don't have these platforms, you can also use a foam yoga block or anything else that's similar and sturdy, and that'll be safe and provide support for the student as they go through that push-up motion. Another version, even if the floor push-ups with the kneeling and the platforms are still too challenging, we can always do wall push-ups. So just find yourself a wall, hands shoulder height and a little bit wider than shoulder width apart. Make sure you take a few steps away from the wall, and then simply push up into the wall. Seated wheelchair push-ups. Now for this, make sure the wheels are locked, and that if the student is wearing a safety belt, just make sure that it is still fastened, but it's a little loose. That way it still gives them some movement space to travel and perform the actual push-up motion. So what we're going to do here is we can either keep the footrest on, or if the student tends to push through the legs and push into the footrest, they can always be swung away. But we're just going to have them place their hands on their armrests and simply lift their bottom off of the seat of the wheelchair. Another exercise and warm-up activity is a sit-up. So if a student is having trouble performing a regular sit-up from the ground, you can always place a wedge underneath their back and their head. This way, this will reduce the amount of range that they have to go through to complete the sit-up, and making it easier if their abdominal muscles are a little weaker. And then as they progress to get stronger, the wedge can either get smaller or it can be eliminated altogether. So I'll demonstrate a sit-up with a wedge, and then there's also another variation of a sit-up with wedge underneath their back and underneath their legs. This way, if the student is having trouble keeping their knees bent while they're performing a sit-up, the wedge underneath their legs will hold that position for them. And again, as long as they continue to get stronger and perform the sit-up better, both wedges underneath their back and their legs can get smaller and then be eliminated completely. So here's the sit-up without the wedge underneath the legs and only underneath the back. So we're going to keep our arms straight at our sides and then sit up and reach for our knees. You come back down. So once the student is seated and then laying back, just have them lift their legs slightly so you can slide the wedge underneath. And then just allow them to rest their legs on the top of it, and then go through the same sit-up motion. A variation of a sit-up for a student who's using a wheelchair can simply be just to allow them to bend forwards towards their knees and come back up. So for this, again, safety is important. So we want to lock our chair, make sure our safety belt is fastened but loosened a little bit so it's not too tight around their waist as they bend forwards. And again, have a paraprofessional, the gym teacher, or an adult nearby, just in case for safety reasons, and to instruct the student in the motion. So once the wheels are locked and the belt is loosened enough, just instruct the student to then reach their arms out to their knees and then bend forward and slide their arms down towards their toes. And then sit back up, and then bend down, and then sit back up again. Another warm-up activity that's commonly seen in physical education classes are jumping jacks, and students in wheelchairs can still participate in this. All they do, again, for this, safety is important. Lock the chair, make sure their safety belt is fastened, and then just instruct them to follow along with their arms. Another common activity seen in gym classes as a warm-up activity are arm circles. So if the student has appropriate upper extremity control, they can still perform, forward arm circles, backwards arm circles. If they have limited upper extremity control, they can still perform, if able, shoulder circles, just rotating their shoulders back and forth as much as they can. Another good warm-up activity is trunk twists. So what we're going to do here is just make sure the wheels are locked again, make sure the safety belt is fastened, and then instruct the student just to lean away from the back of their chair and just turn side to side. If they have difficulty doing this or unable to rotate their trunk on their own, then they would be allowed to, if able, to grab onto the armrests and then pull with their arms to turn themselves side to side. For a student who is in a wheelchair, a good use of cycling would be an upper extremity cycle. So the student can come up to the cycle that is placed on the table. And this table just happens to have a cutout, so I'm able to get closer. And then they can just place their hands on the pedals here and begin pedaling.